Hi, I'm Revis, and today I'm sharing with you all one of the Infinity Conquests that I completed last season. So this was off-stream game. Just to give some context, I was pretty sick last season, so I did all of my games in the last day or two. And so this was in the morning of one of those days, and then I did the rest in the evening. I believe I already put up the Destroy Thanos list that I completed it with, which was back in right at the end of the season, so I actually didn't get the border for that, unfortunately. But yeah, so I decided to bring one of the decks I played a few of the conquests with was this Brood Absorbing Man deck, fairly straightforward kind of forge deck. I opted for running some of the tech slots for Armor and Iron Man. Armor was to counter Destroy decks, which was pretty popular amongst especially some of the lower collection level people, and it's one of the decks that can get over the top of this deck, so I wanted that option of just like shutting down that deck completely. I also ran Iron Man. It's both good in the mirror as well as being a very powerful counter to Shuri, which is another deck that just kind of gets over the top. But yeah, so here I'm in a good spot. I have the Forge Brood for middle. I have my Patriots already on Onslaught Citadel, and I'm setting up myself to put Iron Man on Onslaught Citadel. And I'm thinking even if my opponent has their own Iron Man, they would have to put a lot of power on this Onslaught Citadel this turn. And most likely, they would just do something like this to try and buff up their board in general. But yeah, as you can see, this is obviously not going to hold up. Based on our hand. Obviously, they don't know we run the Iron Man. It wasn't super popular in a lot of lists. So that is why one of the reasons I went for this option. But yeah, so this list's fairly straightforward to play. But the big thing, right, is going to be managing your cubes. And that's kind of what I want to talk about for a big part of this video is when to risk cubes, when to not risk cubes in different matchups, right? We're going to see a couple mirrors. So getting the edge there is really important, right? So here, making sure that I snap before showing this Brood, super important, right? My opponent just can't win on the after that, right? After they see they can't win mid. But yeah, so right now we're just having a mirror. You might be looking at this deck and you're like, oh, it's outdated. I actually did play this a bit in the Infinity rank. We went like a 60% win rate, and I do think it is outdated a little bit, but I think it just needs a couple changes to fix, right? So the big thing I realized when playing it is that the Forge Brood Absman combo is still great. Sure, it got shaved 1 power off the Absman, translates 3 power when you copy the Brood, or 2 power when you copy the Sinister. But the big issue, right, is going to be your Loki matchups. One issue I was having with Loki is that them stealing Iron Man or Blue Marvel was just like so good for them and actually let them beat some of your nut draws. So the counter for that, I think, would be to go a little bit shorter, put back in Silver Surfer over the Iron Man, put in maybe just a Luke Cage for the Blue Marvel, just to hedge your bets versus specifically the high Evo matchups that are also very popular right now. I think putting Shadow King is a big risk because they can steal your Shadow King, and if you're running Shadow King and Cage, they can steal your Cage, which makes your Shadow King useless, right? So that's definitely not a direction I would go. But yeah, that's something that I want to definitely test more. But yeah, so here we snapped early because we had the Forge Brood. We were gonna fill what was previously a raft. They ended up storming it, which honestly I think is still good for us, right? It's really hard for them to try and win the storm lane. Thankfully, they didn't have the Brood since they had priority. But yeah, so now I get this Iron Line into the Nidavellir. It could copy this Absorbing Man, Blue Marvel, or Patriot. I don't think I really need much more power in Nidavellir, to be honest, with this Iron Man ready to come down. I even have a Sinister to put in Death's Domain, or even potentially Legion to put in Death's Domain. So just a lot of different options there. My opponent opts to just play Mr. Sinister here. Obviously very weak play. So I'm feeling like in a good spot here. But yeah, so another thing that I want to talk about is playing versus your opponent's outs, right? So One thing I noticed through a few games, I'm not sure if we'll see it this game, is that my opponents clearly didn't respect when I snapped or when I stayed in games. Like they didn't play to win, it feels like a lot of the time. They just played to play, right? So you have to know what beats you, and sometimes you can't play around it. Sometimes you have to stay and risk it and just say they don't have it. Obviously, that's a big part of the game. But a lot of the times, especially early on in the Conquest, like don't put yourself behind to see your opponent's cards. I think that's a big mistake that I see a lot of people make that I play against, is it feels like they just don't respect a card until they get beat by it. I saw this especially with Legion, which surprised me because Legion was so popular that it even got brought down from 5.8 to 5.7, and it was still just winning me games that I felt like it really shouldn't have, because like it's a card that you should know exists and you should play around, right? So I don't know if we'll get to see this game, but I'll definitely bring it up when it does happen. I believe there's a game where my opponent could have played around it and they just straight up didn't, and I actually felt like I was going to lose, and I managed to scam out the game purely because of the Legion. And yeah, that's the big power of Legion, right? It can scam you a lot of these games. My opponent plays Echo here. Very interesting. I actually don't know what this Echo is for, but it's very important for me to know this because I do run a Patriot, Blue Marble, Iron Man. All of these are very powerful ongoings. I do not want to get echoed. But yeah. I decided to pass here. We have lots of mana. I don't want to fill right side just yet. I want to be able to play into Morag at some point. And I don't want to stop with Super Flow, so I'm kind of just leaving it open. It does turn out to be Clintar, which is definitely a location that reduces some of our flood and really pays off me not playing Patriot there. Right, so decided playing Super Flow since there's nowhere else for me to play. My opponent went Brood into Absman, obviously very strong play from them. Actually surprised it didn't snap here, right? If you look at my play, Sinister into Iron Lad on the Forge, like it's just not similar, right? They're much farther ahead. I definitely would consider leaving if they snap, but like I said before, don't leave if they're not snapping. Stay, see if you can outplay your opponent, right? Push the limits a little bit, right? So here I'm gonna try and use this Forge on my Brood and try and contest the Super Flow, since Clintar is about to be absorbing all the cards there into a 1 symbiote. So yeah, so that's why I'm just kind of chilling here, waiting for them to go. I think it's a tough turn for them because they're running out of board space, right? They only have 1 board spot left until this Legion flips for them. And yeah, so now we're tied over on the left. It's going to come down to the buffs that we can give. I actually can't play any ongoing mid here, even though they freed up the Morag. So I'm just going to play Blue Marvel on the right side, likely into an Iron Man. But it is largely dependent on what I think they're going to play, because right now we're tied. So if they play a Patriot or a Silver Surfer, they can win the left, right, and then likely the mid, versus, right, so I kind of have a choice, like, do I play the Patriot? I can only play the Patriot on the right, so it's very unlikely I win the right lane with that line. But yeah, so since it's 1 extra cube right here, nobody snapped. Forge Iron Man should always win me the tiebreaker, assuming that it's tied. So I decide just to go for that, say that they're just going to go, yeah, for like a Chavez, and that's actually what they end up doing. So get this 3 power Iron Man 4 with the Blue Marvel, and win the tiebreaker by 3. So now we're up on 9-4, which is a really good spot to be, going into what I believe is high stakes, right? So now I can, if I get a good hand, I can snap, and it's kind of my opponent's last game, right? So right here we get the Forge Brood, and my opponent has to decide, is this the last game I want to stay in, right? we've seen one location. Obviously, very little information given. Nobody's played even a one cost yet. So yeah, so they go with Echo again. Now I'm just like, okay, now that's good to know. That's where I can put my brood, right? And then I can put my ongoings into a different lane. But yeah, they have the Forge as well, so it makes sense why they might have stayed, right? If they have Forge Brood or Forge Sinister, you should very often be staying in these games. It's one of the better hands with this deck. Honestly, it's one of the better combos in the game. Honestly, I'm surprised that it's not seeing more play. I might experiment with this some more later this week. With Ravonna is something I was considering. So if you're watching this, you got a sneak peek of one of my Ravonna decks. I was looking and I was like, Patriot and Mystique are both reduced by Ravonna. Iron Man is reduced by Ravonna. Forge is reduced by Ravonna. There's some freaky combos you can do with a similar style deck, especially if you're running like a Silver Surfer. You could go like a Wolfsbane in there as well. And it's kind of like a Sera for these kind of Patriot Flood decks. Yeah, so here I'm getting some use out of my armor, playing into the Vormir, and then playing this Sinister. One thing to notice is I always play Sinister last if I'm playing multiple cards in a turn, because of the chance of me drawing Absorbing Man or Iron Lad into Absorbing Man. I'd want to be able to copy these, right? So now it's turn 5. I kind of have two main options. It's either Blue Marvel or it's Legion, and then the last turn, right, I'm drawing Chavez. Since I have priority, I go for the Legion as a way to, I believe, just lock them out mid. Okay. I opt into Blue Marvel instead. It looks like I'm gonna try and maintain Prio here. They go for the Legion. Okay, I was gonna maintain Prio and surprise them with this Legion, but it looks like they opt for it instead, because the main reason here was to lock them out of Vormir. Right, there's one slot, but so since I'm ahead now, I just need to win another lane, and my options are play for the Vormir path, or play for the armor path, or play for the left side. I decided to play for the left side since it's a bit harder for my opponent to play there. I have the Wasp to die and then play Chavez there. But I do believe playing right side should also win with the Chavez. So yeah, my opponent's already all in, so they have to stay. I do think that Legion was pretty risky for them. They actually go for this Iron Lad, which hits Brood. So actually, it's a good thing I didn't play for the right side. I would have lost to this Iron Lad. That's actually an interesting point on my take risk. My opponent took a risk there because that's the only way that they saw themselves winning the game, was by doing this like what was likely a 1-3 on the Iron Lad to hit a Brood, or I don't know what else was in their deck, but Brood was likely the best hit, right? Putting 12 power there was the only way they could beat Chavez there. Luckily for us, we had a Wasp, so we could play around it. We might have been able to win if we played the Wasp on the right as well. But yeah, that's besides the point. Here I play this rock out for Blue Marvel or potential Patriot. But yeah, we're going to the second game of Infinity Conquest. Subterranean is pretty rough when I don't really have any combo cards. They also play a Forge, so I'm already like, okay, another mirror. If they have a Brood, we're going to be a rough spot. But we do have this doubled Forge on Karmata, and we top deck this Mr. Sinister. And so I'm considering snapping already, but I'm like, okay, if they have this Brood here, it's like super rough. And they actually do have this Brood, which makes me very surprised that they didn't snap this. Obviously, it's a gigantic Brood. But I top deck my Brood, and I'm doubled, so I snap back. We're going to contest their Brood lane with our 8 power Broods, and I'm just going to say that's just going to be enough. Right. And then they play this Dakin, and then now all of a sudden I'm a little bit confused because this is a very different build. This is very likely a Silver Surfer build, right? because Silver Surfer runs like Killmonger and stuff to kill it with the Dakin. So now I'm thinking like, okay, so now they can go up to 9s, right, on the broods. I decided to play the Blue Marvel, bring mine up to 9s too, and then we'll have to follow the Patriot. So assuming that they don't play another 3-drop there, we should be good. Obviously the Sera there though doesn't mean they can play another 3-drop. But it is kind of tough for them to kill the shards as well, right? So they would need to have like double shard, Killmonger, Surfer, and play the Killmonger on the left side, right? Something like that. And my last turn here is really strong. I have this Patriot, this Wasp, and the Sinister, which doubles up on Karmata, so if they don't play the shards, we can win there. It's just a lot of stats across the board, like very, very good. So I'm always staying here for the 4. It was Subterranea as well, if you remember the first location before it got destroyed. So it is unlikely that they also have some kind of nuts like we do. But yeah, you never really know with Subterranea, right? Sometimes people draw 0 rocks, sometimes they draw 1 like we did, sometimes they draw 5, right? So clearly my opponent's taking a lot of time, which likely means they don't have it. I actually rope snap me here, and I'm just like, all right, I mute them. I guess they're in a BFV, but I'm already all in. I just don't have time to think here, really. I'm like, yeah, maybe they have the nuts. They only play 3 cards here, which might be enough to do it. They don't play for mid, which is good for me since we only have 12 mid. We have 35 on the ruins. So with this Spider-Man not pulling anything, which is super key, right? They go Spider-Man Polaris to try and pull stuff. We are good. They only win the right side here. Yeah, if they had played the Polaris left, we would have lost, right? But obviously, I guess they thought there would be more power in the Karmata, or that they would get this pull of one of the Broodlings off, which is not something I expected, but it was something that they couldn't do since we filled the board. So yeah, we do get the 8 cubes there, and they just leave. Basically, not quite a free win. Definitely very winnable for them, but like a quick win. So yeah, now we're going into our 3rd game. Definitely some risky risky second game there, very losable, but also definitely something that you should risk because of the Subterranea and our good like just hand and board state, right? We had 34 in a lane, we had 12 in another, and we had like 20 in the last or something. Very powerful stuff. So yeah, worth to take the risk. That is the theme of the video: risk taking. Here we have Sinister Brood. There's a Limbo. We have a Legion. So if we get ahead by turn 5, we can Legion the Death's Domain, turn off the Limbo. All just very powerful stuff. I decided to play Mr. Sinister mid since I would be looking to copy the Brood, so I don't care about the Sinister dying. I just want to put some power on the board. My opponent has not played anything on turns 1 or 2, which is definitely very interesting. We get a good flip here on our Blue Marvel and our Brood. We snap here, and yeah, so like they emoted like what just happened, so I'm like don't let emotes influence what you do. Mainly we snapped here because Brood and Blue Marvel are great, and generally peak is really bad for your opponent, especially if they don't insta snap, right? So we had a little bit delay, they didn't snap. I have Brood, I have a top deck Absman here, probably one of the best possible draws. And then we find out that our opponent is playing a Mr. Negative with the peak. Right, so they go Iron Man into Crystal, and I'm gonna Absorbing Man mid. They snap back, and I'm just like, oh no. Like, do I leave here? I like maybe. Okay, so this is where I take a risk, right? I'm like, it's a Limbo game. I have Legion. I have this Absorbing Man to win mid. As long as I'm ahead on Limbo, right, and we ignore this Iron Man lane. They also notably played Iron Man first, so they can't copy it with Mystique. As long as I'm ahead here, my depths domain, I can hit with the Legion and kill everything on their board and end the game, right? So they go Wong Mystique, and then once again, notably, I have priority with this, so I get to go Wasp into Legion and kill whatever they play on this Wong lane, as well as anywhere else on the board. So the only things I have to be like really afraid of here is tigers. But I am just saying that they don't have that, right? It's not super popular in the current meta decks. If they're going Wong Mystique, usually it's either a Black Panther or a Silver Surfer. Obviously, the fact that they played for mid here is a little bit suspicious, right? Because like that means it's something that they want to die. But yeah, so it is this Black Panther here, so they get a absolutely massive Black Panther that just dies. And then they get this Ironheart trigger to buff the side lanes, and it's not enough. So yeah, we are pretty thankful here that so this is the game where my opponent definitely did not play around Legion, right? They could have played around Legion by playing this Ironheart on the Wong, and then I believe they have a relatively good chance of winning that left lane, right? So they ended with 9 there. If they got 3 more procs, they could have gone up as many as 8 more, which would have been, right, 17 to my 14. So they didn't even need 8 to go 8 more. They could have just hit 3 more times to go 6 more. But yeah, winning that in the peak game because my opponent didn't respect Legion is definitely super huge, right? And I don't think it would have been too much more of a risk. I mean, obviously they wanted to Zola, but I think you need to respect Legion in that scenario where you're Mr. Negative, you get peaked, you don't have priority. Like, that's a risk that the risk of Legion is something that you should play around. And yeah. So yeah, that's the game where I'm like, yeah, my opponent did not respect Legion there at all. But yeah, so they go a Psylocke into a Wong, which is notably not Mr. Negative. So we snap here with our Forge into Brood into Absorbing Man. We also have our own Iron Man. So if they go super tall, we can try and combat that. They play a Mystique here, so now they have the super scary Wong. But we just get big broods, so we'll have priority, and I can very potentially mess with this Wong with our armor, which funnily enough is not getting too much play for anti-destroy, but instead for just dealing with like Zola and locations so far. Yeah, so we go Absorbing Man on the left, pretty much guarantee priority since if they want to place Black Panther, it goes mid, and we're already up by 2 on Bifrost. One thing I might have been supposed to do is just play Wasp on the right, just in case. But yeah, so here you see I just go for this armor. Alright, the only way I see us losing this game is to a Zola, and armor prevents the Zola from copying the Black Panther across the board. Obviously a very obvious setup, so yeah, we get to see this go off 4 times and do nothing. And we close that out very fast as well. So 2 fast games back to back where we leveraged some risks in situations where I felt like we were slightly favorable. Yeah, into the unknown, right? So obviously I think both situations my opponent had a way to win, but my opponent doesn't know what I'm playing, so we're leveraging that, right? And so early on in games, your opponent doesn't really know your deck too much. Maybe they're not like super aware of the meta as well. I think that's what we got away with. Where's the negative player? So taking advantage of that can be very powerful, right? Putting yourself up. Obviously, both of those are 8 cubes. Very difficult to come back from 8 cube games. But even just putting yourself up 4 cubes can be a huge advantage in these infinite conquests. The later you go, the more impactful it is because people will be more stressed out and that kind of stuff. And that's why I have to give another tidbit of advice and treat every game the same, whether it's Infinity 1 or Infinity 5. So yeah, that is another tidbit of advice I'll give. But yeah, so here we have Forge, but don't really have much follow-up, so obviously not going to snap in blind to my opponent. They go Jeff. Obviously it could be any number of decks with a Jeff here. But yeah, so we get nothing. I'm debating if I should play this Armor or just wait another turn. Chance at drawing Brood, Sinister, or Absorbing Man obviously would be super good. So yeah, we're waiting for that. We get this Iron Lad. It has 50-50 to hit a cloning card, which can be a Sinister or Brood, which would be huge in my opponent's Storm lane, right? One thing it can hit though is Legion, which would end this game. So I am considering playing the Wasp to counteract that. But then I thought about it and I was like, yeah, wait, if I play this Wasp, it's just not winning Stark Tower anyways if it becomes flooding. But yeah, so we kind of whiff. We hit the Patriot. Obviously not that powerful without anything to Patriot buff, right? We're just double buffing this Wasp right now. We're drawing a Chavez. So definitely laureled a bit here. They're going to end up winning mid just with Nebula and either Jeff or a Doctor Doom, right? So it looks like it's like a move control, maybe a move wave deck for my opponent here, right? There we go, there's the wave. So definitely one of the more powerful decks in the meta. Although I think the Kitty version was more popular at this time. But yeah, wave. Yeah, I look at this Chavez and I'm like, all right, is this Chavez enough? And then I thought about it and I was like, no, definitely not. We're losing every lane, right, with this Jeff moving mid and them playing just something on the right side. So yeah, we take the retreat for 1 cube here, but we get a ton of information on our opponent, right? And I'm feeling pretty good, right? This deck generally just plays like 1 card a turn, gets ahead by turn 5, which is when my opponent is looking to wave me, and then oftentimes they're just playing a Chavez or another big card like Legion, Iron Man, or Blue Marvel. And yeah, so the main thing I think I have to think about a decent amount would be playing Wasp on turn 5 to just give that little edge, right? You don't want a Wasp stuck in your hand going into a wave turn if you don't have to. So yeah, Wasp definitely one of the most flexible and powerful cards in the list. It really does make a difference in a game of inches, right? Which is oftentimes the most important games, right? Sometimes you'll blow out your opponent with the Forge Brood stuff, but sometimes it's a little bit closer, right? Maybe you get it off curve. Maybe your opponent also has a really strong high roll. In this case, it would be like Cravens and Silk bouncing around a bunch. But yeah, having Wasp to just like fake out your opponent is just very good. But yeah, so my opponent snaps me here. I decide to stay mainly because I have this Iron Lad, which is 8 power, and it can copy Mr. Sinister or Brood at a 50% chance. Which would just be like a ton of power right into any lane. Obviously they ended up flooding here, so I want to try and fit it into this flooding lane. They go for a Spider-Man, which unluckily hits Iron Lad and pulls it out, which means our Wasp is kind of just stranded there, unfortunately. But fortunately for us, we do hit this Brood, which means we just went from 3 power to 27 power in the Eternity range. Now I kind of have 2 options here. I decide the Absorbing Man is definitely the most powerful. I snap back because it's 7 power, right? So it's going to be under 18 power mid. I think they're always leaving after they see it. They might already be considering, but they're probably not going to consider too much because they think, right, they've already won flooding. Maybe they can win mid, but with this Absorbing Man into Iron Man, I think I should be able to clutch it out. There's also, right, pretty much no way they can win Eternity range. They need 22 power there. That deck usually runs Magneto as the biggest thing, and maybe a Chavez. Can't play that back to back. So yeah, they end up going for the wave and the Silk, and then we just play this Absorbing Man, get 18 power mid, and yeah, we're pretty much all set, right? If they play for the left, the Silk jumps out, and there's nothing they can play as 22 power. If they play for mid, we're about to go up to a 19 times 2, which is 38 power. I'm going to say it's pretty tough for them to overcome a 28 power difference. So yeah, this is for another 8 cubes. I actually don't remember going for this many 8 cubers back to back, but I believe they do leave here because it's just too much ground to cover. They should just be even losing to Chavez, I believe. Right, Chavez would put me up to 25, which means they would need 50 in the middle, which is also not possible in their deck. It's like, right, they played waves, so they're going to play one card. There's no one card that adds 15 mid, to my knowledge. Definitely correct me if I am wrong. But yeah, so that's definitely right. Another situation where good snapping by me pays off, right? They snapped me early for 2 after I hit this high roll lad, but before I showed the absorbing man, I snapped for an extra 2, right? So I ended up winning 4 off of a game that I was considering retreating for 1. So big swings like that definitely put you in good spots and allow me to do things like snap this hand where it's just forge into brood. And I'm pretty much snapping purely because I had an empty space mid. I waited because of the fact that I wanted to see what the board would turn out to be. Unfortunately, it does hit a collapse mine here, and I'm thinking about whether or not I need to pass here, actually, since we do have Patriot into Blue Marvel, and Patriot does buff all the rocks. But yeah, I decided against it. I'm like, we'll just play Brood next turn. It gives us an extra chance to draw this Absorbing Man, or this Iron Lad, which is still good on turn 5, if I get either of them. So yeah, we end up passing here. Opponent Nebula grows a little bit, obviously super unfortunate, but not much we can do about it. I don't draw either of the 4 drops, but it's still just always Brood here. 15 power in a lane, definitely a very strong thing to do. So yeah, we're just setting this up. They go for a turn 4 Storm. This does mean I have the option to Legion here, but with only 1 power mid, it probably is not worth it. Instead, I'm just thinking about what they can put into flooding to win there, and then I just decided, yeah, just to Legion the monster. We have Patriot and Blue Marvel, so we benefit from these extra cards. If they decide to fill flooding, we actually get the bonus monster. Unfortunately, they didn't fill flooding, but we still managed to lock them out of Monster Island. And yeah, unfortunately, they play the Spider-Man here, so this does get a little bit weird. But yeah, so they get double value off the Craven. We're still ahead though. I have Patriot. I have a few different options. I have Patriot, Iron Man, and Mr. Sinister. I think Patriot gets the most value here since there is 5 targets for it. So it's basically a 3-11. I can make it 6 targets by playing this Mr. Sinister on the left lane. So yeah, my opponent snaps me here. I do think it's a good snap from them. They're looking like they're in a decent spot. This does make me switch my order a little bit to try and force the Silk back onto Monster Isle. But yeah, so here I'm giving up the middle and just saying that we're gonna win the left and the right. But yeah, I'm just doing some math behind it to see if we can beat a Chavez on the left or the right, and I believe that determines whether or not I stay here. I'm not gonna do the math right now. Yeah, so I can't beat a Chavez, so I leave. I think Doctor Doom was another potential for them to do. I think this play did beat a Doctor Doom because we'd be up by 5, by more than 5 on the right and the left, but it didn't beat like anything else. And they could also play multiple cards, right? They didn't wave that turn. So those are all the things that kind of factored into my decision. We got another collapse mine here, but thankfully this time they didn't have a 1. If they had a 2, it got canceled out. I have this Mr. Sinister and Forge again. But yeah, I get the top deck the Brood, so I decide to go Forge Brood and to likely an Absorbent Man. And even though it's slightly off curve, I still think it's just one of the best things you can do, right? They go for the Storm. I do think the Storm has kind of been a detriment to them so far at this game. It just locks out a lane. It like tells me like, yeah, play into this lane with my Brood or Absorbing Man. Obviously they can Spider-Man here, since there's only one card this time, and they have priority. But if they don't have that, right, they're gonna struggle to win that side. And yeah, they don't have it this time, so they just go Craven Silk. Obviously it's great for their Craven lane, but it doesn't just mean that I like completely lock out the Storm lane and then I can play for Vormir. They haven't played in Vormir yet, so I'm just gonna add 50 in there, and then I can just follow up with Iron Man. It's 30 power. Very tough to keep up with that, especially since they have to kill something in the Vormir before they go for it. I'm also keeping Legion in mind here, but we always beat that since we have priority with the Sublime Man. But yeah, so here we can tell they went for Jeff since they played into Flooding, and then likely a 3-drop mid. This turns out it's a Spider-Man. So they do add a bit of power into Flooding. This means I now have to put a bit more power into Flooding. So I believe I opt to for the Blue Marvel in order to make it so that we can beat a Doctor Doom or the Silk jumping over it, which would both go to 15. This allows me to go to 18 there and 21 on the left. Still note they haven't played into Vormir, so this pretty much locks up the game from my perspective. So yeah, I believe that's what I'd go for, and that's what I should go for, yeah. I lock it in here, they retreat, as you likely should when your opponent has their high roll, even though it was a turn off curve. It's just very hard for their wave deck to keep up with just pure stats, right? So yeah, we have this lead going to high stakes. We're up 7-4, which is basically being up 8-4, basically double, since since we're on an odd number. If we get brought down to a low health total, we'll still have like a sliver left, right? The 1 left, which is basically 2. But yeah, so we have Brood into Absman, so I just snapped this. They only had Silk. And it's kind of just a cluttered board for them. So yeah, I end up just snapping this, which is something that I can afford to do when I'm up like this. If my hand looks even reasonably good, it's just very powerful to get this kind of snap. Here I'm debating if I should play this Wasp mid or not. Craven mid is very scary since they run 3 drops, right, and 4s that can get pulled there and buff with their Craven. But thankfully, since we filled it, we don't buff up their Craven. But they do manage to lock us out of Valley of the Hand, which is a little bit scary. But yeah, thankfully we do have this Blue Marvel and potentially Patriot off the top. That would be a very good. There we go. Yeah, so I go for his Patriot. It's buffing all the Brews, the Wasp, and the Raptor. So it's basically better than much better Blue Marvel here. The only things we're not hitting is the armor and then the Brood and the Absorbing Man themselves. Yeah, so they pull some stuff more mid. Play this Miles, which also gets pulled mid. Pretty much lock up the fact that they're gonna win mid, right? But yeah, one thing to note is the Silk does end up on Valley of the Hand, and since we have priority, now if they play for Valley, the Silk will move. So essentially, they're only at 3-22. So I have to, yeah. So 3-22 means I'm up 19 there. So I only need to play for Savage Land. So yeah. So Blue Marvel, as tempting as it looks, it doesn't win me mid. It likely doesn't change the outcome of right, so I should just stack as many points into Savage Land as possible, which is not Iron Man, right? Iron Man only brings me up to 14, while Chavez brings me up to 16. But yeah, I'm also looking at this Captain Marvel, and I'm thinking, okay, if I play Blue Marvel, it brings me up to 17. Is that enough with the Captain Marvel moving? And it's not. But yeah, so they go Doctor Doom to try and win the Savage Land. It's only 12. Their Marvel has no space to move, and we clutch it out for the 4th win of the Conquest. So yeah, not super long this set, just 5 rounds, and I do think it just shows that this deck is very powerful against these wave strategies. Here you can see me changing my avatar. I don't remember. I believe I go with the Spider-Man, which might have been slightly influenced by my opponent playing that Spider-Man against me. But yeah, I hope you're learning some stuff from these videos. Definitely let me know if there's any topics you wish for me to cover. I'm kind of just going freehand. Like, I had those few things I want to talk about, and now I'm mostly just talking about the games, bringing up anything that I come across. I do apologize that there's no sound from the games. I was listening to music through my speakers, and it came through my microphone, which was being recorded. Like, usually I exclude it from this so that you can listen to the sound, but it came over on the same channel. So I won't make that mistake next time. I'll use some headphones. But yeah, so now we're going to the 5th game. Like I said before, play it the same. Every game is the same. Obviously, you'll feel a bit more pressure, but try your best not to let that influence your choices, because if it does, it's going to make you play worse 99% of the time, from my experience. So yeah, we end up not waiting too long, and we're into the last game. Get a monster isle here, pretty solid since I can protect it with armor, which means even if they are running a Shang-Chi, we're just good. Since it's Asgard and we have Brood into Absorbing Man, I aggressively snap here. We can play Brood ideally on the right side into Absorbing Man mid and basically guarantee the Asgard. Our opponent plays Mr. Sinister here. Likely means they're playing the same deck as us. Very unlikely that they are playing Cerebro 2. Right, that is another option technically. Okay, so they don't have a turn 3 play here, which obviously looking very good for us. This Brood into Absorbing Man. We have priority, so there's no way they can stop us. And there's pretty much no way they can win Asgard here without high rolling, I think, an Iron Lad. So yeah, they do go for Absorbing Man on the Mr. Sinister, which does explain the skip, but it turns out to be 1 point short, and we win this Asgard, which just gives us like a plethora of options, right? To try and win here, I am looking at this Legion since it gives us 9 power mid while they get nothing, and then 9 power right, but they also get 9 power, right? So kind of the same outcome on the right, but super good for mid. Like, it puts us way ahead mid. They go for this Iron Man, good for them, but as long as I put myself ahead on my style, we should be good, yeah. But they actually retreat now, and chat, I'm saying chat, but it's people watching the video, don't use retreat now, like, avoid it. In these kinds of situations, especially when you make it to the last turn, you should not be retreating now because of the chance of me, your opponent retreating, me in this case. It also just like tells me a lot about their play style. But yeah, so I snap here. I Forge Brood into Absorbing Man, which is like the dream hand, right? So we snap on turn 1 there. They have Mr. Sinister again. We have this Forge. It's all looking real good. And then we get the Sokovia, which hits the Brood, which is the worst hit by far in our hand. It means now I just have to hit this Patriot and be super sad because our Absorbing Man copies nothing and we have no follow-up. Thankfully, it draws Mr. Sinister, so it means I can go Armor Sinister. copy of Absorbing Man next turn, but my opponent does have this Brood, and they actually go Wave here, which is super interesting. Likely means that they're a Doom variant of the deck. Right, Doom Wave. But they did do a turn early, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, I just stick with this Absorbing Man plan. Played over into Sokovia just to give us some options. They didn't snap back, so we still have room to do different things. And yeah, they do go for this Dr. Doom. Obviously a very powerful choice. And now it's kind of a 50-50, a little bit less than a 50-50 from my standpoint. Right, if they play a Chavez and they flip this Baxter building, we lose right. But if I play Chavez and they just play like a Patriot, they also win right and mid. So yeah, it's a question of, do I think they're gonna play Chavez or do I think they're gonna play Patriot / Blue Marble? Because I believe Blue Marble should win tiebreakers here. They could also have a Wasp, which would tie, and I believe it would just be a full tie with the Mirror Island buff. So yeah, they go for this Blue Marble, and we lose tiebreakers by 2, which is super unfortunate. So yeah, we lose four cubes on a game where we were super favored with our hand. Definitely feels really bad, but it is only the 3rd round of the of the round 5 Infinity, so gonna hold on. It is unfortunate that we have White Hot Room here and we have all of our 5 drops in hand on turn 1. Obviously not something that we're looking for with our deck. Those are the most expensive cards. But yeah, they have Forge into Brood here. I guess they weren't snapping because they thought that we might have Brood. But I'm definitely very thankful of that because I would have definitely left. This is definitely a game where we can show a bit of the snapping differences and how snapping better is important. Right, so here my opponent's just letting me stick around in this game that I really should already be out of, right? There's no reason that they shouldn't be snapping when they're already up the White Hot Room. They had Forge Brood. All I played was this armor, right? Like, I'm playing Forge on turn 4 by itself. I think it should be pretty obvious my hand is a no good. But yeah, so here I'm just thinking about Legion, and right, if I Legion Necrotia, it does shrink their Broodlings a ton, it shrinks them mid. Maybe I can try and scam a win with Chavez somewhere. The other option is to play Legion on Strange Academy and just like rotate everything around the board. Hope that I get out ahead in a couple lanes. But yeah, I actually opt to pass and not show that I have Legion because I'm just going to retreat this game. This is definitely something that's super powerful. It generally is more powerful to do early in the game, but since they're running this like weird list, right, wave stuff, I didn't show them Legion yet. Or I did show them Legion. I didn't show them like some of my cards, and I pretty much had no chance to win here, so I just stayed to see what they have. And we get to see the Scarlet Witch, right? Scarlet Witch likely means that they don't have Legion, and it's just a really good thing to know that they have in general. But yeah, so now we're down 8-5. This is a free retreat for my opponent, but it is not for me since I'm already on an odd amount of health. So we're gonna go with this armor. We do have Brood into Iron Lad, which can potentially be some pretty high roll stuff. We do top deck Forge, which is awesome. So I opt to go for Forge and then Brood the Vault instead. I snap here pretty aggressively to try and get some stuff out of my opponent, right? They didn't play Forge on turn 2, which likely means that they don't have, right, Forge, Sinister, or Witch. Most likely they are just playing Brood here. And then the next scary thing would be an Absorbing Man, but we also have this Absorbing Man, which is definitely very, very good for us. But yeah, we do need to try and win this vault because it is going to be kind of hard to win a Dream Dimension. But I kind of don't have the option to do both, right? I can't play Absorbing Man and play something in the vault, so I just opt to Absorbing Man and just take basically the win mid, right? They end up committing even this Iron Lad to the vault, which is a Patriot, and then I play Absorbing Man mid, and now we're in a game where I need to win this right side, right? As far as I know, there's no way for my opponent to win mid anymore, so I am just counting. I can add 8 here, but more importantly, if you look at my deck, I have Iron Man, Blue Marvel, and Legion in my deck, right? So Legion does nothing. Blue Marvel brings us up a little bit of points, right? We'd go up, instead of 8, we'd go up 11 or 12, and Iron Man would just win us the game. So I stay, and we hit this 1 and 3 on the Iron Man, and clutch out the 4 cubes. And part of the reason I stay here is because I don't want to go down. I'm never retreating here, because being down 3 to 8 means I essentially have to win 3 or 4 in a row, depending on how much my opponent retreats. So I think it's my odds of the 1 and 3, or at Blue Marvel might have brought it pretty close, but more, yeah, even just the 1 and 3 is higher odds than winning like 4 in a row, right? Even if it's a mirror match, so a 50% odds, let's say I have 50% winning 3 in a row or 4 in a row if my opponent's smart and retreats one of them, is like a 1 in 8 odds, right? So I value that flip there, and I think it's really important to take a risk in that situation, to just win you the game, right? And put myself back in a winning position is the more important thing, right? So now I'm up 5 to 4, which is even or winning, right? I have a slight advantage of that 1 extra cube. It means I can afford to snap them and not be knocked out if I lose the snap. But yeah, so here they have the Forge brewed into Absman. We had Forge into Iron Lad, which hits the Absman. Which hits the Brood. So we're set in Central Park, and they're completely clogged on Throne Room and Wakandan Embassy. So I'm looking and I'm like, wait, these Broods on the Throne Room are only 7s. If I play this Legion, we steal the Throne Room buff, right? And even if they play Travis on that side, they would get the buff, but I would still have the buff on my Broodlings. It is scary if they Patriot here, they would steal the buffs. But if they don't have a Patriot, this Iron Man just completely locks them out. So I decided to sack the extra 2 cubes on the odds that they don't have Patriot. Looks like they actually tried to go with their Iron Lad, but they only hit a wave. So this Iron Man just clutches it out, and we just close it out really fast, right? So we were down those 5 cubes early, but because of the Iron Man risk, it basically let me take another risk here of them not having a Patriot, and close up the game real fast after the initial struggles that we had. So yeah, we just close those out. I hope you enjoyed the games and I hope these tips like helped you out with your games and your Conquest. I think it's a very different game mode than like something like the Infinity Ladder. So yeah, knowing these risks and like the fact that sometimes you have to play it on like 1 and 2, 1 and 3, and sometimes 1 and 4 odds, because of the fact that losing a game, like, right, being down like 2 to 8, for example, is very difficult to come back. I think it would say like coming back would be like a 10% or 20% odds depending on your matchup. If it's a mirror, it's basically less than 20%. But yeah, I'll leave you off on that. Feel free to drop any questions in the comments or while I'm streaming, and I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.